welcome, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming today for our second in the series of our series on e-health strategies. I'm Shirley Fenton, Managing Director of the Waterloo Institute for Health Informatics Research, and I am very pleased that we can host these seminars, both for the audience here and for those of you that are coming in through our live webcast. I apologize for the delay. For some reason, our systems could not find each other in terms of the servers, so hopefully we're okay now. Special welcome to our speaker, Diane Beattie, VP and CIO of the London Hospitals, and also a special thank you to our seminar series sponsors, McKesson, VO in Canada, Healthcare Information Management and Communications Canada, and Smart Systems for Health Agency. I have one very brief announcement, and that is our next seminar. I hope you will join us again. It will be Wednesday, November the 23rd, and Richard Alvarez, President and CEO of Canada Health Infoway, will be here. He'll be talking about accelerating the development and implementation of electronic health records. So please come. I think it will be a very interesting talk. As you know, the purpose of the e-health seminar series is to examine the Canadian and Ontario e-health strategies in detail. A lot of funding is going into these systems, a lot of investments, and with the goal of managing healthcare better and to realize a pervasive electronic health record. So we've invited key experts involved in developing and implementing these strategies so that we can learn more about them and critically evaluate their progress. Since we're starting a little late, I think we'll just proceed right directly to introducing our speakers. So Dominic Covey, Founding Director of the Waterloo Institute for Health Informatics Research, will introduce Diane Beattie.
Diane, welcome. I've known of Diane longer than I've known Diane. She's very well known. She's very well known in the area of the deployment of information technologies in Ontario hospitals. And I always wondered what it was about Diane, though I heard so many good things. And I think I know the secret. Diane didn't come from the healthcare industry, so she managed to come in with a fair amount of background and attitudes and so on that sometimes don't grow within our industry. Diane's background includes being in companies like Union Gas, where she was Director of Business Development and General Manager of Southwestern Ontario. Diane is on the Ontario Hospitals eHealth Council. I've been able to have the honor of working with her on that council, and what I've noticed is when she speaks, people listen. This is very important, and I think she represents in what she's doing and the way she brings herself forward a model for people who attempt or would like to be CIOs, for example, within health institutions. I think Diane is a fully accepted member of her executive team at the institution. That, by the way, is something very rare in Ontario hospitals. Very often, IS is somewhere pushed down, even if a person has a title of CIO. Right now, Diane is the integrated VP. I guess that means you're all kinds of colors or something like that, of Health Information, Strategic Partnerships, and the Chief Information Officer at London Health Sciences Centre in St. Joseph's Healthcare, London. She'll speak to us on implementing a shared services approach to digital imaging, getting to Filmless. Diane, welcome.
Thanks, Dominic. Well, it's a pleasure to be here this afternoon, and thank you for the warm introduction. I've known Dominic a little bit, and this is really great for me to be invited to Waterloo, but especially great because I graduated from here several decades ago, I think it would be. As we look at healthcare today, I think what I'd like to do is try and fulfill sort of 3 or 4 purposes in the talk today, is to give you a sense of healthcare from the business driver perspective versus from the technology perspective, and I'll explain that a little bit as we go along. To show you how the solutions that we're building in Southwestern Ontario are working and how they're formulating and coming together, hopefully will trigger some ideas that you have and some dialogue and discussion in the last half hour or so, and also be able to share with you some of the lessons learned that we've gone through. This is really what we're talking about today is about getting filmless, but it comes in a different, much broader context. And so maybe if we just start with, why is there this urgency to try and transform healthcare in Ontario and across our country? And if you sit back and think about what keeps CIOs and CEOs of healthcare organizations across our country awake at night, I think the thing that they'll talk about are generally these 5 topics. Whether it's the ability to meet patient safety demands, whether it's government direction, but most importantly, I think the thing that they'll talk about is the shortage of healthcare workers. And as you look at this, the primary drivers are really our demographics. So does anybody know what the average age of a nurse is? It's 48 years old. I come from London, which was London Life, so we have Freedom 55. Most everybody else understands 30 and out. Most nurses started in their early 20s. We expect that they're going to start to retire in their early 50s. And some of that is because the demand on them from the perspective of shift work and the physical labor that they do in lifting people and helping people move around, by the time you get to 50, it starts to have a little bit of a wear and tear on you. When we started working in London on this problem, what we were worried about was that we were estimating that for every 5 nurses that leave, there's only 1 coming in school behind. There was an article in the Globe and Mail about 1.5 years ago that said for every 8.5 that take that Freedom 55, there's only 1 coming in behind. So what it was saying is we really have to change how we work. We have to change how hospitals operate. You couple that with the other change in demographics, and that's the baby boom pushing through. So there's a group of hospitals in the States. We haven't been able to get any Canadian data, but in 2000, 2001, their demand went up by 5%. But in the age groups of 45 to 50, it was up 8%. And in the age group of 51 to 60, it was up 10%. And so now you start to see this declining supply of healthcare workers and this increasing demand. And thinking about how we're going to manage that and make it happen, not just in Southwestern Ontario, not just in Ontario, this is a global concern. So let's just start to streamline this a little bit and talk a little bit more about Southwestern Ontario. All of you from the Kitchener-Waterloo area will be very familiar with Southwestern Ontario and the population base we're serving. From a hospital perspective, or as we go into the new LHINs, LHIN 1 and LHIN 2, Kitchener-Waterloo is to the east a little bit of our geographic area, but we're serving about 1.5 million people in that area. London, with its 2 teaching hospitals, is the Tertiary Quaternity Care Centre. And so when you look at the population base, about 95% of the care for all of Southwestern Ontario happens within Southwestern Ontario, so it's a regional focus. There's a little bit that goes across the border at Sarnia and Windsor into Detroit and Port Huron, and a small amount that moves into Toronto. But generally, it's focused there. When we started the DI project, we were looking at all of Southwestern Ontario, and Canada Health Infoway came back and said, that's huge. Why don't we start with a pilot? And so you'll see the group of hospitals and cities that are inside the ring there, the red ring, are those hospitals that are part of our pilot process. And we've just finished the planning stage, or we're just finishing the planning stage for Owen Sound through to Windsor. So the Thames Valley hospitals, when you think about them, there are eight hospitals in total. London is now 2 hospitals. We used to have 7, and through restructuring and amalgamation have moved into 2. And then we have 6 community hospitals. And I'll just quickly give you a little bit of detail, or let you read on the screen the detail about those hospitals. When you come into the teaching centers in London, only 45% of our patients come from London Middlesex. The other 45% come from Southwestern Ontario, and that final 10% come provincially, nationally, and a very small percentage now are coming internationally. When you start to look at the amount of the number of folks that we have working in our organizations inside of London, you'll see on the next slide, St. Joe should help us add up to about 13,000 healthcare providers as we're going forward. And when we look at the patient activity, we're doing in this whole group about 700,000 radiology exams a year. St. Joe's is a little bit different mix now than it was before. You can see that they do a lot of ambulatory mental health, veterans care, and long-term care. And now you start to look at the Thames Valley or the community hospitals, and you'll see that they're much smaller. And part of the pilot that we're in is how do big centers and small rural centers work together. It's a lot different. The annual budgets for the two London teaching hospitals is probably $1.1, $1.2 billion. The annual budget for 4 counties health services, which has 16 beds open at this time, is less than $10 million. And so how do those organizations work together to make sure that we have the flow of information and that we can deliver care closer to home? Jointly, we have what we call the Thames Valley Hospital Planning Partnership, and that's those 8 hospitals getting together, their board chairs, their CEOs, and their chiefs of staff on a regular basis. And we've come up with what we think is important for our area to be successful. And the first is that we need to be one of the top 5 academic centers in the country. We need to integrate both citywide and on a regional basis, and I'll show you how we're trying to do that. We need to be seen as a Canadian leader in e-health. And most importantly, from a patient perspective, what we're trying to get to is one patient, one record. And that I'll try and show you with some examples as we go through. But if you think about someone in Newbury and they've had to have an x-ray of some sort, if we have to bring that person into London then to have the diagnostics done, you can waste valuable time. If we can take the image in Newbury, transmit it to London, the doctor in Newbury and the specialist in London can be on the screen watching and talking about that person's case at that time, we can certainly improve access to care and hopefully wait times. This is a pictorial that we've used for the last 3 or 4 years that looks at our vision of really what we're trying to do. And I think the most important thing that you'll see from a computer science perspective is all of that kind of stuff is underground. And our goal is that it will become like heat and hydro. You flick the switch and there it is. All of the care is what we really want to focus on. And what we have built is a sort of a 5-stage game plan. And we're working in phases 1 and 2 now. The first stage looks at automating the care process, and the second stage is called one patient, one record, or how do we share that information across. When we get to step 3, what we're trying to do is connect to the community. So from the London Teaching Hospital perspective, it's to connect to the other 28 hospitals that are across Southwestern Ontario. But we don't want to stop there because you want to connect to the individual physicians in those other communities and towns. You want to connect to the CCACs and the long-term care facilities. And at the end of the day, you want to be able to connect to individuals and their own personal health care record. From a research perspective, I think step 4 is probably the most interesting because what we're starting to build is a huge data repository and a picture archive of images and information that we can use to do longitudinal healthcare research. Once we're finished pulling all of that together, obviously you want to move to building best practices, and you can start the cycle all over again. When we first started talking about this, a lot of the folks in our group didn't like the notion of being called the plumbers or the underground or the utility. So we've used another analogy, and being Canadian, it sort of fits. We use the hockey analogy. If you go to a Leafs game at the ACC Centre, what you're looking for on the ice is there are 10 skaters, 2 goalies, and if you ever noticed how many referees there are 4 referees on the ice all the time, so 2 refs and 2 linesmen. If you come away from the game talking about the referees, generally they have done a crummy job. So what they're there for is to control the flow, control the play, so that you as the spectator has the most enjoyable experience. And you come away talking about my hero Guy Lafleur, who doesn't play anymore, or Matt Sundin, or whoever. If you come away talking about the refs, they haven't done a good job. And when you think about information management and information technology in our healthcare space, that's the same sort of analogy that really fits us. We need to be there. We need to control an awful lot of how the information flows, but we're not the stars on ice, so to speak. This is our definition of a health record. And what you'll see in the bottom portion here is what we call the foundation pieces. And the pieces in black are those pieces that we've already got implemented. And basically those are a set of tools for caregivers. So it's how to schedule a patient, how to put their chart together so you can view the results, some of their dictation, some of their lab work. Those are a set of tools. What we're working on now are those things in red, and we'll be doing that over the next year, year and a half. And that's what we call the transformation layer. And that's where we actually start to change how caregivers deliver care. And this is where we think we'll get the benefits to help offset or minimize the demographics that we're looking at. Our goal in here is to give back to the nurse 5 minutes an hour, half an hour a shift, to be able to focus on patient care and not focus on paperwork and those other types of things that they're spending inordinate amounts of time on today. For the physicians, it's to allow them to see one more patient a day without lengthening the length of their day. And you think about the 2,000 physicians that we have in London, and you think if they just each saw one more patient a day every 200 days of the year, it quickly adds up how many more patient visits we could have and how we could improve access to care. The top of the triangle is really about integration, and that's really in that step 3 of connect the community. We've got components and pieces all the way through the triangles underway, but I think you have to figure out how to build from the bottom up and make sure you have a foundation. When we've looked at this in a couple of different ways, building the foundation pieces on a complexity scale is about a 1. Working through the transformation layer would be a 3, and then doing the integration piece would be considered a 5. So what do you mean by making this all fit together and doing this transformation? So when we talk about it in a series of short phrases, and we try and use them over and over and over again so that they stick with people. So what we've said in our hospitals is that we need to get to seamless, paperless, and wireless. And I'll show you a picture in a minute of the amount of paper that you'll find in a hospital. It's frightening, actually, the volumes of paper that we work through. But in our world, we're going to have a caregiver that has their office in one building, their clinic in another, and their OR time in another. We need to be able to make sure that they move from one location to the other. They don't have to stop and think about, how do I get on the system, or do I need a different password? At St. Joe's, where my office is, I log on as Diane B. When I go over to LHSC, I log on as BDD. If I'm a physician in the emergency, and I don't care where I am across the city, I don't want them to have to stop and think for 2 seconds about how to log on. Most important is that they're focused on the patient, not on the technology and what it can do. We use the term wireless, and mainly because it's not the only solution, but because it fits with the other paperless and seamless. But really that's talking about mobility. We have the caregivers that are moving across the city. We have patients now that move around the city. So they need to be able to move the information and the data to be where they are at the appropriate time. The other catchphrase that we've used an awful lot is success equals process change plus enabling technology. And the easy part is the enabling technology. much more difficult part in all of these projects is doing the process change or helping people manage the change and doing their jobs differently. And so I'll try and give you a few examples of how that's worked for us. To put all this into perspective and make things come together, what we've said is there's some basic guiding principles. And one of those is that across the city, we'll have a common architecture, software architecture. So if you went back 5, 6 years ago when we had 7 organizations, we had 7 patient care systems. Today we have 1. We had 5 or 6 different ways to do a payroll system, one of which was manual. Today we have 1. We've tried to get ourselves to common hardware platforms. We've focused in, and now we have just 5 or 6 key industry partners that you'll see across the bottom. Because in our world, the Peter Gilberts and the Kevin Somervilles, what they were doing was spending probably 60 to 70% of their time doing RFPs instead of figuring out how it was that we were going to deliver care differently. So what we did with Hewlett-Packard, for example, we had a common RFP amongst all the major vendors, and we said, let's just pick one. And we had them each give us a proposal. At the time, we picked Compact, which became Hewlett-Packard, and we said, for the next 5 years, we will partner with you, and we've got different arrangements to make sure our pricing is effective, et cetera. But it's allowing us to manage our business differently and to focus our people on helping to provide care differently. And you can take that and push it then out into the region as well. And gradually we'll have all of the Thames Valley hospitals using similar platforms. But what the topic of that Dominic asked us to speak about today is how to get to filmless. And the word that we would say is the future is filmless and the future is here. And right now inside the Thames Valley group, all of those 2 teaching hospitals and the 6 community hospitals are now all filmless. We only use film for mammography, and that's because of some of the requirements that we have from the radiologists and from the province. But we're there. What we went from was on your left, those huge old libraries. These are film libraries, and now it's much more streamlined and easy to find. And there's key reasons to do that is basically because we're improving the flow of information and how it goes across the hospital. I told you earlier I'd show you a little bit about the amount of paper that's been in our hospitals. And one of the things that I learned last week when I was at an event was that for every terabyte of data we store, it's the equivalent of 50,000 trees. In our archive right now, we're at about 5 terabytes, moving very quickly to 10, and the expectation over the next few years is that we'll be at 50 terabytes. We've soon taken out so many trees that it's not viable or feasible to continue to work through. So our quest in this situation is to get everything to digital, to be filmless, and to be paperless. What you'll find as we go through here is I'm going to focus on the people side of things versus the technology side of things, because that's what I think is the primary business driver for where we're heading. So I talked earlier about the aging demographics, the need for our financial situation and how it's moving forward, and recognizing that to get funding, you're going to have to collaborate. And with Canada Health Infoway, they won't talk to you if you're one hospital coming forward saying, I've got a great idea. They're looking for groups of hospitals to come together or groups of healthcare providers to come together to provide common solutions to get to much more of those common platforms. When you look in the radiology world, we talked about nurses before, but that's pervasive across all healthcare workers. And what we have in our area, in our 28 hospitals, is 101 radiologists. 30% of them are over the age of 55. And docs tend to work a little longer, at least the older ones do. But 66% of our sites have limited coverage. So if I looked at those 6 rural community hospitals we spoke about, 4 of them don't have any of their own radiologists. They borrow them from London. So a radiologist goes from London to Tillsonburg every other day to provide care. The scary part of that is, think about on a long weekend, the radiologist was there on Friday morning and went back home on Friday afternoon. In the old way, someone came in and they needed care, they had an x-ray taken. There was no one there to read the film on Friday afternoon. And that person would often stay in the hospital over the weekend waiting for a radiologist to arrive, probably late Monday morning or early Monday afternoon. Can you imagine the anxiety in that person? Can you imagine the cost that it is to have someone sitting in a hospital bed on an afternoon? In our new world, what happens is that radiologist is back in London in the afternoon, but the images and the work is pushed to his screen, and so he reads the image in the afternoon, and the person gets their results, anxiety levels drop, and if they don't need to be in hospital, we can make sure that they get the proper care at home. So our project is a Canadian pilot for the Thames Valley. Canada Health Infoway had 2 pilot projects, one in Fraser Valley in BC and ours here in Southwestern Ontario. The key thing that we had to, one of the key things that we had to get over is that diagnostic imaging equipment is very expensive. And they tend to, at least in our hospitals, get what some people think is more than their fair share of the capital dollars for equipment. So what we had to make sure people understood was that PACS, or picture archiving, was not just another piece of DI equipment, but it was really about changing how our hospitals were going to work. And in our case, every caregiver is going to be impacted that needs to look at an image, because it's now not on the film that you saw on that first slide, but it's on a screen. And how is that going to manifest itself? So for the caregivers, there's no more film, there's no more paper reports, it's all done digitally. They're going to interact with the DI results on computer screens. They're going to have the ability to be much more mobile. And so the little phrase that they like to use is any image, any time, any place. And that becomes particularly important, again, when you think about that Tillsonburg situation. So what we've set up is the opportunity for radiologists to interact. So let's say you're a family physician in Ingersoll, and you've had a patient in, they've had an exam done. In the old way, it would go into London, or the London radiologist would read it, and they probably on a phone conversation, the radiologist would have the film, and the family doc in Ingersoll would have nothing in front of them, just a typed report of what they saw on that film. This way, we can have both the family physician in Ingersoll and the doc in London seeing the same thing on the screen at the same time and talking to each other about what that diagnostic is and what is the best level of care. So we're pushing this whole world not only into the hospitals, but basically back into primary care in the world of rural community hospitals, where family docs are basically the physicians that run the hospital, different from a teaching hospital environment. The other thing that we found this is very helpful for is in the teaching world. So London is we like to think, a world-class teaching facility. Not everybody might agree with our definition, but we'll go there anyways. And what we've got is the senior consultant or the specialist in one place and their resident in another. Again, that same scenario almost like the Ingersoll one, where you want to be able to teach and help people work through things. The old way, it might have been you just had a phone conversation or an email conversation about, what do you think about this, and this is what I'm seeing. Today we can pull that all up on the screen. They can both be looking at it at the same time, and the image can be moved forward. And again, I think we get a better result and a better teaching and learning experience. So across Thames Valley, how did this all come together? I think the most important thing that you'll hear us say is that there was a shared vision. And without a shared vision, nothing much happens. And the shared vision was between the hospital CEOs, the hospital board chairs, and the chiefs of staff, wanting to find a different way to provide care. The goals of the partnership, as you can see there, were to increase patient care access to images, try and mitigate that shortage of professionals, enable an image taken in any of the organizations in Southwestern Ontario to be interpreted at any other organization with a qualified, credentialed radiologist. And this is really important in some of those rural, small communities that don't have their own radiologists. It improves access to specialists and second opinion. It certainly improved the viability of the teaching hospitals. And I think what we've really done, and most importantly, is started to develop a new standard of care. Investing in the shared service and the approach were sponsors from the federal government through Canada Health Infoway, the provincial government, and the 8 hospitals, and our industry partners. And our industry partners would be Hewlett-Packard, General Electric, Cerner Corporation, and a small organization that is sort of a not-for-profit organization that we called RadNet, which is our wide area network across the city. And in behind that, we've got partners such as Bell and Cisco supporting us as we go forward. The members all came up with this notion of a cooperative because it meant that we were going to share costs and risks. But if you look at that small hospital and the big one, the little hospitals were feeling like the ant and the elephant, and feeling if the elephant just breathed heavily, they could be squished. The big hospitals were feeling about the puppy and the tail, and figuring that all of a sudden the tail was going to wag the dog, and they weren't sure that that was where they wanted to be. So what we built was a model that we called the equity model versus the equality model. In the equality model, everybody gets one vote and has equal say. In the equity model, we've built it such that London Health Sciences does 55% of the exams. So if there was 100 votes, they would get 55. Newbury only does 1% of the exams, so they would get 1 vote. But the threshold for making a decision is not 50%, so LHSC could win every time. It's actually 80%, so that it says we're really moving to a consensus model. We have only, in the last 2 years, voted once. And the reason we did the voting was because in the group that we were starting up with, they weren't quite understanding the concept of the equity model. Once we sat back and said, guys, we can't do it on the equality model, it's got to be this other way, I was asked to leave the room, a couple of the other VPs were asked to leave the room, and the DI leads, or the diagnostic imaging managers, sat together and an hour later came out and said, this is what we're going to do, and here's why, and here's how everybody wins. And so I think it's really important that we think about those models. The total investment that we had is about $50 million, and as we've gone forward to do the planning for Southwestern Ontario, you can see how easy it is to leverage that investment. So from Owen Sound now to Windsor will cost us about half what that original project did. The work that, this is one of Canada Health Infoway's slides, and basically what they're saying is one of the other reasons you need to collaborate is there's absolutely no return on investment for an organization that does less than 20,000 exams a year. And if you think back to those first slides, the 2 teaching hospitals do more, St. Thomas and Woodstock would do more, but the smaller community hospitals aren't into that higher threshold. So there has to be a way to leverage what's happening in the larger organizations and make sure it can happen in the smaller ones as well. This is our clinical architecture, and this is a picture that we would show to not the techies in the room, but to the clinical people in the room, because what we want them to understand is that they are only going to see and have one screen in front of them. So if you're a radiologist, you're probably in the PACS world, and if you need a report, it will automatically launch you into the Cerner system to pick up that report. If you're a clinician on the floor, frontline nurse, or whatever, you would be in the Cerner power chart, and it would automatically push you into the GE system so that you can see that image. So here's what a nurse would see on the floor, and that automatically, they're there, they want to view the image, and it will automatically, and this is timed, yep, there we go, automatically flip so it brings up the image to them, and it's transparent to them that they've got two different systems and two different things working in behind. From a orthopedics perspective, I think the beauty of this and why we found that after working with the system for some as short as 5 minutes, some as long as 2 or 3 days, they won't go back to film. And the reason they won't go back to film is the fact that on these we can magnify, we can blow things up, we can spin them around, give them a 3D effect, and when they're talking to their patients and showing them what's happening, it's a much more graphic, it's easier, it's intuitively obvious for people to see and understand what's happening. Let's just talk a little bit about, that was sort of what we did and what it takes to put one of these projects together. We actually started in December of 2002 when we got a call from Canada Health Infoway saying, can you put together a proposal by January the 10th for us to look at a diagnostic imaging project. In the end, they gave us another few days to do it, but we put that proposal together. Currently, this says December of 2005, we'll have all 8 hospitals. That will be when they're officially filmless, because to get your refund or your rebate or your reimbursement from Canada Health Infoway, you have to prove that you can go 30 days in a filmless state so that the system is operating and everyone within your organization is capable of working. So our last hospital came up on October the 17th, which was Woodstock. They'll go through a little shakedown period, and then we'll put them through the 30-day filmless. So by sometime in December, all of us will be filmless. Just to do the planning, again, Canada Health Infoway asked you to do some planning that we had not normally done in the hospital environment. And at the time, we thought it was fairly onerous, and it took an awful lot of people and an awful lot of time. But there was some value in their thinking and in their methodology and in their discipline. We have not missed a milestone, so we're exactly on time, and we will come in significantly under budget. So you'll see a little bit later, the original budget for the project was $52 million. We said that we would do the project for $50 million, thinking that this discipline would help us, and that in the end will probably be about $48 million in total. This just gives you a look at our partnerships, which I've talked a little bit about, and then the agreement that was put in place. So we actually sat down with a facilitator, and the facilitator then went and worked with a lawyer to put together what we call the Memorandum of Understanding, which says, here's how we agree to play. When Canada Health Infoway had us do this, they thought that all the other provinces with their regional health authorities wouldn't need this. This was something specific for Ontario. The model for this document is now used all across the country and in all of the regional health authorities, because we all have to, once you get a group bigger than one, you have to have some rules and some ideas of how you're going to operate and work together, and that's what this has done. So it's very much a voluntary agreement based on principles of mutual respect, trust, and shared commitment. This is our governance structure, and I think the most important group that we have up here is up on the top right-hand side, which is the Physician Advisory Group. They can't be involved in the project on a day-to-day basis just because of the workloads and the things that we really want them to do. But as an advisory group, they're absolutely essential to where we want to be and what we're doing. When we looked at the financials, the key concept here is about table stakes. So if you looked at where the London hospitals were in their development, and then you looked at the community hospitals, there was a huge gap. And to get people working and working effectively together, you had to get everybody up to that level playing field. And so that's basically what we've taken the last 2 years to do, is pull everybody up onto that level playing field, so now that we can work together to change how we deliver care. This is our initial budget, and you'll see that it adds up to the roughly $52 million. When you think about the sweat equity in the implementation, there's a tremendous amount of effort and a tremendous amount of people involved. Because what you'll see a little bit later is we had what we called the travel team. Each of these hospitals has to be able to operate at the end of the day independently. So people in the smallest organization have to understand the system and be able to use it, just the same as someone in one of the larger teaching hospitals. But I had the folks that sort of keep track of all the records for us sit back and look at how the team spent their time. And if you look about it, it's about thirds, not quite. But only a third of the time was spent managing the project and actually doing a lot of the technical pieces for the project as a whole, building the common data center, etc. About a third of the time was spent getting each organization ready, getting their equipment in, doing things like that in that particular space. But almost 40% of the time was spent getting people ready. And I think that goes back to that little phrase, success equals process change plus enabling technology. Unless the people are ready and know what's happening and have their training in the appropriate time frame, it won't work. So we do a thing called just-in-time training for the docs. They get trained 2 or 3 days before when they're going to use the system. They've got a buddy with them for the first 2 or 3 days, and then they've got someone on a pager quite close to them so that they get the information they need when they need it. And most importantly, one of our fun slides, you'll see this in almost every one of our presentations, is there's a whole lot of people in healthcare that have a heck of a time letting go of the old ways. So Granny, look out, here we come. And why we found this was important, this is a slide that I picked up from Cisco Systems and some work they did in Europe. And basically, that little phrase that we had of enabling technology and process change was very important, because they said if you put in the technology and then go in and try and change how people work, your costs will actually increase. If you work on the process change and then adapt the technology to that process change, you can see 20 to 30% cost savings. I'm not sure we'll get to the 20 to 30% range, but if you talk to Dr. Taves, who's the chief of radiology for St. Joe's, he will tell you verbally that he is someplace between 20 and 25% personally more productive using the system. So what's helped us be successful? I think a vision and a game plan. And this is a picture of all our CEOs and board chairs, along with Mr. Smitherman, from the 8 hospitals that participated. And we had a big kickoff day where they all went down and signed up to say, we're in. And we had George sign up with us, so that was great. The thing that I think makes the most and is most important in all of this is communication. When you don't hear something as an individual, you always think the worst, and you always think that something's wrong. And we had 2 or 3 communications people tied into our project. That was one of the requirements that Canada Health Infoway had, that we had a strong communication plan. And we've got newsletters and websites and all kinds of different places for people to constantly get information. At the end of the first year of the MOU process, we actually had the facilitator that helped us do it back in to meet with the CEOs. And Harriet asked them, what would you change? What didn't you like? And they didn't have anything that they wanted to talk about that day that they didn't like, and that was good. It made me feel good being there. But she said, all right, what has made this successful? And the first thing they all said was the level of communication. We always know exactly what's happening, when it's happening, who's doing what, and we feel part of this. We don't feel like we're out in Woodstock or out in Tilsonburg and not part of what's happening in the London project. So I think that's the key to really making some of these big projects work. The second thing that we did is we really had a team approach. And again, it was one of the things that Canada Health Infoway insisted on. In Fraser, some of their project people weren't dedicated to the project, and they actually had to step back and reformulate their team. So we were fortunate to learn from that, and our folks on the team are pretty much dedicated. Our core team is dedicated. We also have what we call the travel team. So when we were doing the implementation in the 2 London hospitals, which were our 2 biggest implementations, there were people from every other hospital as part of the implementation team. So there was a little worry in those smaller community hospitals when we got to them. The London guys would say, okay, I got what I want, see you bye. And the CEO of Tillsonburg Hospital said they didn't know what to do when the London people arrived, or the team from London arrived, to help them do their implementation. They just felt almost like they were swarmed with this huge group of folks that worked interactively. I couldn't tell who was from Tillsonburg, who was from GE, who was from Bell, who was from Strathroy or Newbury, and who was from the London, because the team all worked together. And as we've moved from site to site, the team has traveled together. At each site, they also have specific site managers to make sure that everything that's happening for them in their world is going to work out. So it's really a team approach. The focus we've talked about on process change and people. What we've agreed up front was this is, and there will not be any IT projects. Now, when the IT people heard that at the start, I think they all just about had a heart attack and said, who is this woman that's come to be our CIO? I'm not sure I like this. But what we found is that if it's a patient care process and it's a patient care project, we will get outstanding results, and I think we have been. There needs to be a really consistent, common training approach, and that concept of just-in-time training that we did with the docs. So they got their training 2 or 3 days before. They were ready for it. We gave them just what they needed. A few weeks later, we went back and gave them the specialty things that might help enhance what they were doing. We've done a lot of celebrations, and I think probably in the London hospitals we could start to sell cakes. Because at every one of these little group sessions, when they come live, whether it's the urology department or the hand and upper limb clinic, we have a party. And the most important part of that party is it's the key physician in that group, the key clinical person, whether it's a nurse or a physiotherapist or whoever, says, we made it. And the project team is there to cheer and yell, yes, you did make it. Have a piece of cake, a cup of coffee. It takes all of 10 minutes, but it's their celebration that they were successful. And then at each site, as we've finished up, we have a major celebration and a passing of the torch. And on the far left there, you'll see a couple of people cutting film, and the people from Tillsonburg on the right are passing the scissors to the people from Strathroy on the left to say, it's your turn, here we go, it's time to cut the film. And that has built, I mean, it's sort of goofy in a way, but it's built a tremendous sense of pride in each organization, and that is really what's important. From a benefits perspective, this is something that we're really learning and something that Canada Health Infoway is helping us to do. You see the benefit indicators that we're starting to try and learn how to measure. That's one thing that Dominic has said the University of Waterloo is very good at, is evaluation, so there may be some collaboration we need to do at this end. We're just beginning that process of how do we do the benefits. And here you can just see a sense of the indicators that we've got in place that have been agreed to with Canada Health Infoway and our data sources to make all of this happen. I think most importantly, though, are the benefits to patients. And whether you're that person in Tillsonburg that now doesn't have to wait over the weekend, or you're the person that's been up skiing in Collingwood or Owen Sound, snowmobiling in the Owen Sound area, and you have a slight catastrophe, and they need to take some film of you. In the old way, they would airlift you to London, You'd have all of those tests probably done again because they couldn't sort out one place from the other. Now you've got the physician in Owen Sound, if it's a skiing accident, talking to the trauma surgeon in London, deciding whether it's necessary to airlift, what would be the most appropriate care path for you. And I think that's really important as we go forward. It's also important in these small community hospitals that they have access to diagnostic imaging. For them, it's sort of a lifeline or a lifeblood. If you don't have DI, or diagnostic imaging, you can't have an emergency department. If you don't have an emergency department, you don't have a hospital. If you don't have a hospital, it's very hard in these small rural communities to have economic development. And the example I would use is Ingersoll and the Kami plant. It was very important to the people of Kami that Ingersoll have a hospital. It didn't have to be the large teaching hospital and the tertiary center. That's down the road, 20, 25 minutes away. But what they needed was, in case of emergency, their employees had access to care in a very quick and timely fashion. And so now what we're building is that ability to get even a higher specialty of care available in Ingersoll without having to worry. For the care providers, I think the key part for them is that they now have access to information. And as they've started to share that information, it's been tremendous of what we've seen in people starting to collaborate from St. Thomas to Woodstock, from Woodstock to London, from Strathroy to Ingersoll, and so on and so forth. So it's really replaced a lot of what they thought and felt was a fractured work system. It's starting to be seamless for them, and that's really what we're trying to do. What we're also trying to do is really mitigate that shortage of caring professionals that we have. We need more pairs of caring hands, and this has started to show that that can happen. So again, Dr. Taves saying he feels that he's someplace between 20 and 25% more productive. So that's important. What have we learned as we go forward? Just to close on what are some of the things that we would share with others, and as we've gone through this process with Canada Health Infoway, I think we've had to write 25 little white papers on what they call lessons learned. And so they're all sitting out there on the Infoway website. I know Infoway has shared these with people in France, people in Italy, I think in China. So they're being used all over the world so that we get away from this notion of, it didn't happen in my backyard, so it's not where we need to be. We've got to find a way to share information, share best practices, and accelerate what we're doing. But our lessons learned really was that working together is a daily experience. It's all about people and relationships, and you have to take the time to communicate and to make sure that everyone feels part of where you're at and in the loop. If they do, then you have a significantly better opportunity to be successful. Projects have to be driven by the business needs. So the clinical people need to be part of all of that planning, all of the process, and they have to be the champions for what's happening. I came here today by myself. Normally, I will not, in our hospitals, get up and do a presentation by myself. I will always have one of the physicians or one of the clinical people with me. And generally, I travel with Dr. Gillian Kernahan on one hip. She's the VP of Medical for St. Joe's. And on the other hip is Margaret Nish, the Executive Vice President of Patient Care for the London Health Sciences. It's really important that we have that bond and we understand that this is all about patient care, not about having the latest and the greatest toys. The other thing that we learned is you have to circle back. So we've done the implementation and everything feels good, and then we're off running to the next organization to put in something for them. You have to circle back because there's always something that group of caregivers finds, well, this isn't quite working for us, this isn't quite right. And so there's probably a 6 to 8 week time frame where we send in what we call an optimization team to work with people, to help them understand, to help them figure out that if we didn't have something just 100% perfect, we've got resources to go and make the adjustment to get it to as close to perfect as we possibly can. Communication and change management are the key. To see the amount of time that we've been spending on change management and communication, I think it's really been vital for us. And last but not least, you need to have strong partners and partners that want to play together. And I think through that, we've been very, very successful as we've gone forward. As I said, we're on time, we've met every milestone, and we will come in significantly under budget. So that just gives you a brief look at what we've done. I could probably stand here and talk all day, but that wasn't the objective of this afternoon. The objective was to have some discussion and dialogue and to see if we could stimulate some conversation and some different ideas about how to do things.
Thank you. What we'd like to do is give you a chance to ask questions or make comments, and to do that, we'll pass the microphone to you. So if you could be patient, we'll bring it around to you. It may take a second. So put your hand up as soon as you can. If you have a particular question, I'll try to get to you, or Shirley will get to you. Make sure that...
This isn't a question, actually. It's you had those three words, one of which is wireless.
Mm-hmm.
And you sort of expressed that it wasn't the best used. Maybe tetherless.
Tetherless, yep.
Tetherless is kind of it's used around here, and it's not, doesn't have the same connotation as wireless. It's more of what you described. But for what it's worth, there you go.
Well, we'll see if we can get a new word in our vocabulary.
Other questions? Any comments? You've talked a fair amount about the, if you want, the implementation, organizational side of it. Could you give a quick overview of the technological picture at all? Would that be feasible without your slides of it, or?
Well, first of all, you all have to know that I'm not technically competent, so I'll have to admit to that right up front. Kevin's in the back, so Kevin, if I misspeak, if you can just do this and help me out, that would be good. In behind on our platforms, we're using Cerner Millennium as our Radiology Information System, and that is a integrated system versus a best-of-breed system, and we're running it on VMS architecture on HP 1280s, Alpha 1280s. The radiology side of it and the archive portion of it, so we have the data archive or the data repository is Cerner. The radiology side, or the PACS, the picture archiving, and the picture archive are GE, and we're using their GE Centricity 2.1, I think we're at. And we've worked with Hewlett-Packard on the storage, and they've actually developed a brand new product. It's called the Medical Archive. And what it is they'll just bring in terabytes of data for you, or terabytes of storage, and plug it in as a separate appliance, which allows us to share information differently. Part of that work with Hewlett-Packard also was in conjunction with a Canadian company out of Vancouver called Bicast. And Bicast is very popular in grid storage and did the background work. So HP and Bicast collaborated to build our storage for us. Our wide area network around the city, we have a Cisco Sonnet ring, as well as a fair amount of dark fiber underneath. And we have dual paths ringing the city in both directions. And as we get out into the community, we use LargeNet, which is across the Bell network, and we're looking for redundancy for them to actually build probably a wireless component on the background side, the last we've been looking at. As we started out this project, we didn't have a proper data center. At St. Joe's, the data center was in the basement under an endoscopy suite and had pipes, water pipes running through the ceiling. One night, one of the water pipes broke, and you can imagine the mess that we had. I think it was because we were in a faith-based organization, but some young, brave kid went in and put plastic over top of all of the servers. We only, in that incident, only lost one server, and we were very fortunate that we didn't lose one young man. But as that process came about, the CEO at that hospital said, Dan, I now understand why you have nightmares. We need to get you a proper data center. At the other hospital at London Health Sciences, we were out in an old veterans building. It was a wooden building with wooden floors. Even in the middle of winter, we were having trouble getting enough airflow around the machines to have enough cooling. We were losing machines from time to time because of the heat in the room. We were having problems with the floors because they were old and the tiles weren't great, and we had a thing called zinc whiskers, which is, I guess, like dust bunnies, really. And so you get a little arcing across from time to time, which wasn't great. So we now have a world-class data center that's off-site that was built with the help of a company called Raycon. We started in January to do the design, and I wanted us in and operational by the end of March. Kevin and Peter told me it was impossible, but by the 1st of June, we were in and operational and working. Since then, we have built a backup data center. It's actually on campus at one of the hospitals. It's about a third of the space. The main data center is 7,000 square feet of raised floor. And the backup data center, we're now just putting everything in place so that everything's built as failover. So we've only had one little problem. That was with a switch. And one day, these two switches came to work, Dominic. And the one guy said, I got a little bit of a headache, but I'm still okay. I can come to work. Came to work, and every once in a while, he put his head down and not tell his buddy to take over. And we brought the network down, and the radiologists were just beside themselves because they couldn't work. And what were we doing to them? So we've had that fixed. And now with our backups and our mirroring, we should be in excellent shape to keep things going. So does that give you enough sense of the technology in behind?
I don't think I have anything to add to that. That was pretty good. And very accurate. Very accurate. I'm not sure if Diane mentioned, but maybe you did, that we actually split the PACS system off, so it is running in the Parkwood, so the redundant site, and we did that about a month ago. So the digital imaging site, the primary and the secondary, are split for DR purposes, and they actually do synchronous data transfer across.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Part of the Infoway model is to replicate the projects across the country, or so that, you know, the whole pan-Canadian EHR. I was just wondering what the next steps are to replicate your experience from London.
Yeah. Well, basically, they've been replicating what we've been doing almost since day one. So we started back, you saw there, in 2003, and we were the guinea pigs for an awful lot of the initial work that Infoway has done. As they've gone out and started other DI projects, they've taken the lessons learned that we've already written up. We're sharing all of the time with people across the country, and about once a year, Infoway brings people from every province together to talk about, in our case, diagnostic imaging, and we share what we're doing and how we're doing it. The folks from Infoway, when they build these projects and start out with you, I think two key things happen. One is you don't get a grant and you get to spend it. How they set this up is they agree with you up front that you're going to do the work. Once you have gotten the work and you've gotten to your 30 days filmless, then they give you your money back, so to speak. So you have to invest, and then they reinvest with you. So there's an awful lot of learning that happens with that. And as they do that, they have project managers that are with you all of the time. So one of their objectives is to help us keep on stream, but it's also picking up information and things that we're doing so that they can share it in Newfoundland, they can share it in Saskatchewan, all across the country. So it's sort of a dynamic thing. And then all of the things that we have learned are sitting out on their website so others can grab them and take them and use them as they would. When you looked at PACS, it was only one of those small triangles on our big set of triangles. And I think what we found there is that it's an easy first step, and it's intuitively obvious to people when they see how easy it is to go digital and what that means to them, that then to get to the electronic record will be much easier because it just works for them. And as I said earlier, the guys that we thought would be some of the ones that would have the most difficulty making the adjustment, once they've used it for even a couple of days, will not go back to film. Does that answer your question? Perfect.
Okay, my name is Mahdi Salam. I was easy. We're working on a project for diagnostic of prostate cancer using ultrasound imaging. There's about 5 or 6 of us working in this project. The question I have here, one of the items that you mentioned here is that you have this system can allow for second opinion. The question actually is not about the second opinion, it's about the image that you have. After the radiologist does the diagnosis for the image, do you archive that or where this image going to go? So the diagnostic type of images and the way that the radiologist does the diagnosis in it, do you keep this information in the system? Yes. Or this is only the raw images that's kept in the system?
No, we're keeping, we have an archive, and part of what the process was with Infoway and why we've gone to this special medical archive with HP is what we wanted was to have all of our backup or tier 2 data on spinning disks, so we don't have any tape. And what we'll do is as we load up the primary storage, it'll move into become the secondary storage and so on. So just push the storage arrays back over time to put that in place. But everything is in the repository. So then as part of that's to help us get to interoperability. So for example, in Chatham, they already have a PACS system that is GE as well, but at a different level. What we want to be able to do is make sure that that patient from Chatham, their images can be stored in the archive, and that those people that are part of the individual circle of care can get to the image whenever they need it, basically in an instant. And I think the service level sort of agreement that we have with Infoway is that we have to be able to pull up those archived images in less than, is it 5 seconds, Kevin? I think 5 seconds.
It's about displaying the image, but not, there's no, my question is, do you have any information, like when the radiologist does
the report, yes. The report is linked. And
no, on the image itself, or it's written, like, is it?
Well,
it's
there's 2 separate repositories. One is for the picture and one is for the data. So the report is over in the Cerner system, and we built the smarts that, when I showed you that flip, so here's the report, it was up on the screen, and then it just launches right away and we'll pull the film or the image up for you. Yeah, so it's all integrated in the process. What we didn't want to have happen is for a radiologist or a practitioner to have to go here and pull up this icon to look at the image and then log on differently to be able to look at the report. So we've launched one from the other and made them totally transparent to the user.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Are there any plans in the works to expand the project to include systems such as cardiology, the hospital information system, and hospital infrastructure systems?
Yes. When we started this, we looked at the overall vision and said we're going to end up with a data repository and a picture archive, so to speak. And what we said was that diagnostic imaging is phase 1, stage 1. As you go through, pathology has tremendous number of slides and things and images that they need to keep. Cardiology, ophthalmology, the ophthalmologists have been trying to say, Diane, we need to see and be able to have our images available as well. So the first step was to get the system, build the foundation, and now as we move forward, what we'll be looking to do is, as I call it, is to add in the other ologies to really end up with one archive and one database. It's going to take us a little while, though, and it's a lot of hard work.
I actually have two questions. One question is when you're archiving the images, are you using a compression factor that's maybe different for the various modalities from CT, MR, DR, CR?
Okay, I'm not that smart, but we are. We have doing some studies. Kevin, do you want to?
I can comment a little bit. I'm not sure. Sorry. I was going to say, we are using compression. I can't comment specifically across which modalities, but the innate within GE's system is a proprietary compression, and it's about 75-80%, 8-to-1. So they're able to take a very large image and then compress it and then decompress it, depending on what the system is doing.
Now let's start that right from the beginning.
Yeah.
There's some interesting work alongside of this with Infoway. We're actually doing some research projects. So part of our team are two postdocs that will be working with a couple of our radiologists and PhD physicists at the hospitals to understand how we can push the compression issue. If you can figure out how to get the clarity of the image and compress it, then we've got a lot better, or we'll have a lot more storage later on, and the cost will decelerate. But there's an awful lot of work that we need the radiologists to be involved in there, so that there is a research project tied to this.
I think it's really commendable that you're able to do this across so many different facilities. And I guess the question that I have is that if I am a physician at one hospital and I have a particular HIS system, I think you mentioned that all your HIS systems are Cerner, is that correct?
Yeah.
And were they always Cerner, or did so you did have to remove some of them out?
Well, we were in a position when we looked at what we were going to do for the diagnostic imaging project, we agreed that we would use the tools that we already had. So London Health Sciences had the Cerner platform and the Radiology Information System, and it was portable to each of the hospitals without having to redo their whole hospital information system. St. Joe's had GE PACS, and so we were able to leverage that to move us forward. As we went through the project, the community hospitals, the two larger ones, St. Thomas and Woodstock, were in a position where their systems were 10, 15 years old and needed to be replaced. And so again, it was easier for us to work together, leverage the investment that had been made in London, and find a way to work with Cerner to get the community hospitals a good deal, so to speak. And we've done that. Woodstock is up live on the Cerner system, Cerner platform now, as is St. Thomas, and next week we start in Tillsonburg.
Okay. And so that when you're trying to identify a patient or search for a patient, it's based on their MRN number, and it's not a problem that you can pick out the images all across all the facilities.
There's an awful lot of work that goes in behind on, we call it a customer or CPI, or patient index. We have a whole team of health records people, and there's one group that just works on data integrity to make sure that Mrs. Jones is Mrs. Jones is Mrs. Jones. And so if a person had images taken in Woodstock, Tillsonburg, and London, that radiologist or the doc looking at those images would get all of the images from all of the various locations to be able to put together a proper diagnostic.
That's excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Comments or questions? Make sure I don't miss anyone.
How does the out of the hospital doctor's office integrate into all this then?
Well, that's going to be interesting because as we've started inside the hospital walls. And when you look at the teaching centers, most of the specialists have their offices inside the hospital. But when you get out to a community hospital, what's happening is the family physicians are really the docs that run those hospitals for the most part. So while they're in the hospital, they have access to the system. To be able to really use this and make a really strong link into primary care, what we're looking at is a way to get them what we'll call remote access. So for the radiologists and the way the system is set, we're actually needing to use VPN. For family physicians and other care providers in the community, we can do remote access through the key fob system and the Citrix back end, so we're able to do that. So in a sense, when you thought of this as only being a hospital project, it's really moved out and started to build a really strong link for us into primary care. And that linkage with the family docs being able to have the images and the reports in their office is going to be a tremendous advantage.
I guess I'm thinking of the other way. Doctors are collecting information all the time. They're often who is seen. I know this is not a diagnostic imaging thing, so it's down the road, I guess. But to get that information into this whole repository of information.
Maybe the best way I can explain what we're trying to do there is if you think of in the old days when you had a daytimer and not a iPac or a whatever, what you had was different views of data for different people. So when you look at your record, your personal record that's in your family doctor's office, it goes from the day you were born till today. When you think about what's inside the hospital, it's very episodic. And so what we need to be able to do is link up those bits of information. But a lot of the information that we gather in the hospital to put on your record, your family doc wouldn't really, you'd be interested in the result, but not all of the data. And a lot of the history would be used in different ways. So if I give you an example, if I'm in the intensive care unit, we're taking minute by minute by minute results and monitoring, etc. If I gave that minute by minute information to a doctor that's looking after somebody in a long-term care facility, they would be overwhelmed and it wouldn't work because what they're looking for is sort of longer-term trends and information. So if I think of the old Franklin planner, the intensive care doc is looking to minute by minute. The gerontologist or the long-term care physician would be maybe looking at the monthly planner. And somebody in rehab or orthopedics might be looking at the week-to-week view of things. So what we've got to figure out is how to put the data together. All of our projects are, we've worked very closely with the Ministry of Health and the eHealth Office and Canada Health Infoway to make sure we have alignment to where they're moving forward. I think from the Ministry of Health's perspective, what we need to see now is how they see the overall e-health agenda for the province coming together to make sure that we can make those connections. But for the hospital to store all of the information from the family doc's office, I'm not sure that they need to be able to talk to each other, but they don't need to have each other's record all in one place.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I'll give time afterwards. Just a quick question. We're a research organization, as is Lawson in London. Have you given thought to the release or access to anonymized images that could be used in various studies? Yeah. Is that something?
We're working with the privacy and security offices to try and do this. Our first goal, though, Dominic, was to build the foundation and make it work. Now what we're looking at is, can you build what we call data marts or anonymous information so that we can take information on this side of the wall, get it set so that nobody knows who's who, but Mrs. Jones will always be Mrs. Jones, and take it across into the research world. Our researchers are dying to, well, I shouldn't say it that way. Our researchers are really keen to get all of the information that we're starting to store for them. And there will be a tremendous amount of research, I think, come out of the London project.
Well, I really enjoy this. I can't tell you how important this project is for Ontario and for Canada, not just for London. It'll be interesting to see how it rolls out in the future, but it's an absolutely critical piece of work, and I'm very pleased to have been able not only to have known Diane, but to have her speak here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.